Mrs. Kate at the Library of Whispers. So today I thought I would revisit these lovely books. The World of Tolkien by David Day. They're a really gorgeous set, and I've done some videos with them before, as some of you may remember. Now, why am I in a Tolkien mood? Well, I have just finished reading the very last chapter of the full Lord of the Rings trilogy in a whisper. So the very last chapter of Return of the King, and I'm in the process of uploading it to my Patreon. So if you're interested, the whole of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is now available there, completely whispered reading by myself. I would love, love, love to post the videos to YouTube, but unfortunately I can't because of copyright issues, and some of you may remember that those videos that I did have, that I had uploaded to my channel, were taken down, so I'm afraid they're only available on Patreon. However, I can do some Tolkien related stuff, so let's have a look at these books. They're a lovely set, and we start with this lovely green one. I don't know whether they're in any particular order actually. In fact, no, they are in an order, and I've got them out of order. Because if you notice, the picture should follow on. So, it's the image is actually smog over the Misty Mountains, I think. But never mind. So this first one is an atlas of Tolkien. Lovely. And the second is a dictionary of Tolkien. And the third, The Heroes, Tolkien. this. In the beginning was the word hobbit. It came into being on a certain fateful summer afternoon in Oxfordshire in 1930. It was not exactly an invented word, but nobody had ever really used it in quite the way Professor J.R.R. Tolkien did when he scribbled it down on a scrap of paper in his study at 20 Northmoor Road in suburban Oxford. The word hobbit was soon to be as much a magical word for Professor Tolkien as hocus pocus was for any fairy tale magician. In fact, hobbit was the most important single word that ever inspired him to invent a story. Most authors create characters and then find names for them, but Professor Tolkien's mind reversed that order. He always acknowledged that it was words themselves that suggested characters, creatures, races, species, plots, places, and entire worlds to him. Above all things, J.R.R. Tolkien was a scholar who studied words, a philologist, and he was one of the compilers of the prestigious Oxford English Dictionary. Consequently, in his creative fiction, words themselves proved to be his. Chief source of inspiration. This was absolutely true of his new word, hobbit. What do we really know about the arrival of Tolkien's hobbit? Superficially, not much. Tolkien himself tells us about the moment of the word's delivery. He makes it sound like an unannounced and anonymous letter, with no postmark and no return address, dropped into his mailbox. All I remember about the start of The Hobbit is sitting correcting school certificate papers in the everlasting weariness of that annual task forced on impecunious academics with children. On a blank leaf I scrawled, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. I did not and do not know why." The human imagination is a complex and peculiar thing, part magpie and part magician. It is common for authors and artists blessed with creative powers to refuse to tamper with the imagination. However, Tolkien was also a trained scholar, and he actually knew a lot about the forces that shaped The Hobbit and his world. Many years after The Hobbit had been published, Tolkien wrote expansively about this seminal moment. And then in this illustration here we have the Shire. You can see the hobbit holes and the lane and the hills and the trees. One of the candidates had mercifully H-L, pronounced hole. Not content with the spiral ending there, Tolkien couldn't resist adding a few more twists by stating that the word hobbit, as a worn-down form of hobbitla, was not used by the hobbits themselves. In their own hobbitish speech, they were known as Kuduk, a worn-down version of Kud Dagan, meaning hole builder, which were Gothic constructs that Tolkien derived from the prehistoric German word kol as. This brings us round full circle, because kol as, meaning hollow, is the original source for the Old German hole, the Old English hollow, and the modern English hole. And if this were not complicated enough, Professor Tolkien added other factors. Among men and elves, hobbits were usually noted by their size, half human size, thus halflings, rather than by their holes. Therefore, Kuduk, hobbit, in Hobbitish translates as Perianath, halfling folk, in the Sindarin of the elves, which relates to Periane, halfling in Sindaran, which is Banakil, halfling in the Western of men, and returns to hobbit, Kuduk in English. Throughout this book, we will see countless examples of Tolkien's endless fascination with obscure philological humour, but more importantly, it will also demonstrate how Tolkien's obsession with words was a constant source of creative inspiration for him. Words had an almost magical significance that suggested endless creative possibilities. Consequently, this book is primarily about words and language and how they can provoke and inspire. Part 1. The nature of hobbits. Dictionary of Hocus Pocus. In most dictionaries, Tolkien's magic word hobbit appears directly after the word hoax, which was originally a shortened form of the magic word hocus pocus. Interestingly enough, hoax has come to mean a trick, a practical joke or fabricated tale. But is not an accident. The story of the Hobbit is, after all, a fabricated tale that Tolkien went to great lengths to present as a translation of an ancient historic manuscript rather than a novel. Clearly, he mischievously enjoyed the idea of creating an elaborate literary hoax. Indeed, after we exclude Tolkien's word hobbit and look at the 13 dictionary words that follow hoax, from hob to hobo, it is easy to see that Tolkien was inspired by this simple list of words to shape almost every aspect of the Hobbit's character. Tolkien's discovery of the Hobbit character through clues supplied by this list of words is typical of his creative logic, and might be described as an elaborate and extended philological joke. In fact, by starting as hocus pocus and working our way through the meanings of the words that follow, we find we embark on a linguistic adventure reminiscent of Bilbo, One Hobbit, and 13 Dwarfs. In the dictionary, words that follow hob, hobble, hobbledehoy, hobbler, but have different meanings and unrelated origins. However, whatever their nature, every one of these words has contributed to the creation and evolution of the Hobbit and his world. If you doubt this, simply take a look at how the Chamber's Concise Dictionary, for instance, currently defines Hobbit. Hobbit, one of a race of imaginary beings, half human size, hole-dwelling and hairy-footed, invented by J.R.R. Tolkien in his novel The Hobbit, 1937. A race of imaginary beings. A hob is a fairy, an elf, an imaginary being, half human size. A hobbledehoy is a stripling, half man, half boy. Hole-dwelling and hairy-footed, a hob is a male ferret, a half-tame variety of polecat, kept for driving rabbits from burrows. That is, hairy-footed hole-dwellers who drive away other hairy-footed hole-dwellers from their holes. If this isn't convincing you, try to imagine almost everything you know about hobbits and see whether the 13 words following hoax don't have something to do with those characteristics. Let us take a look at these words and see what else they can tell us about our imaginary hobbits. The word hob tells us hobbits are hill-dwellers, hole-dwellers and half-human size. Hill-dweller, hob, comes from the root word hump, originally Low German, meaning hill. Australian humpy means hot. Hole-dweller, hob is a spirit that builds its home in a hollow hill. Ancient round barrows are often called hob's houses. Half-human size, hob or hobben, is the generic name for various types of rather benign hobs or brownies. These are man-like, hairy, roughly 3 feet tall and hole-dwelling. The words hobnob and hobbyhorse and hobble tell us hobbits love to drink, gossip, dance and tell riddles. Love of drink and gossip. To hobnob means to drink and gossip together. Love of dancing. A hobby horse is a medieval Morris dancer. Love of riddles. To hobble is to perplex. Now in this picture we have Holman hobbiters, tillers of the soil. Hobo originated as ho boy or itinerant farm worker. Enter Bilbo Baggins. The first and original hobbit created by J.R.R. Tolkien was a certain gentle hobbit by the name of Bilbo Baggins. We have examined the word hobbit and observed what that word contributed to the race. Now let us examine the given names of the quintessential hobbit, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, and see what they contribute to his character and his race. First, let's take a look at the family name, Baggins. Baggins, afternoon tea, a substantial snack between meals. We can see from the opening scenes of The Hobbit that hobbits seem to like nothing better than snacking between meals, and they are especially addicted to extensive 4 o'clock teas. Did the name Baggins give hobbits the habit of overeating, or was the name chosen because hobbit eating habits were already known? It is one of those chicken and egg riddles. Whatever way round, it would be hard to find a better name for a hobbit than Baggins. But of course, that is not the end. And that is Bilbo Baggins, of course. The name Baggins either suggested or was chosen to emphasise the fact that Bilbo Baggins came from a well-to-do family, just as Hob, in brackets it, is a diminutive of hob, or hob with 2 B's, so bag, brackets ins, is a diminutive of bag or bag, the eponymous progenitor of the Baggins family. Certainly, in British nomenclature, Baggins has its origin in the Middle English Somerset surname bag, meaning money bag. So bag with 2 G's means money bag, pack or bundle. The theme of money bag is repeated in the name of Bilbo's father, Bongo Baggins. The root word for bongo is bong, which first entered the English language in 1566 as bonge, a purse, but by 1610 we are told bong is now used for a pocket, heretofore for a purse. Furthermore, we can deduce that Bongo's purse was substantial, for with its contents, Bongo bought the great manor of Bag End, and had enough for his son Bilbo to be more than comfortable. Now let us look at our hero's first name, Bilbo. It means a short sword or rapier. The word Bilbo came to English in the 15th century through the name Balboa, a Portuguese city renowned for the making of delicate swords of flexible but almost unbreakable steel. In Shakespearean times, a Bilbo was a short but deadly piercing sword, a small thrusting rapier. This is an excellent description of Bilbo's sword, the charmed elf knife called Sting. Found in a troll hoard, Bilbo's Bilbo was forged by the ancient elven smith Telgar, and gave off a blue light in the presence of evil. It had a charmed elven blade that could pierce through armour, or an animal hide that would break any other sword. Now face of it, the name Baggins suggests a harmless, well-to-do, contented character, while the name Bilbo suggests an individual who is sharp, intelligent, and even a little dangerous. Superficially and initially, Bilbo Baggins is presented as a mildly comic, home-loving, rustic, middle-class, gentle hobbit. He is harmless and obsequious, full of gossip, homely wisdom, wordy euphemisms, and elaborate family histories. He is largely concerned with home comforts, village fetes, dinner parties, flower gardens, vegetable plots, and grain harvests. Bilbo Baggins is a comic anti-hero who goes off on a journey into a heroic world. It is a world where the commonplace knocks up against the heroic. One has to see that values are different in these worlds. In Bilbo Baggins we have a character with modern, everyday sensibilities that the reader may identify with while having an adventure in an ancient, heroic world. However, there is something different and contrary about Bilbo Baggins' nature. He is a typical hobbit, full of practical common sense, but has a cutting edge. That is the reason he was chosen by Gandalf the magician to be hired out as a freelance hero burglar by the dwarves on their quest. So, epic versus everyday. Hero, burglar, burglar, criminal in everyday society, burglar, hero in epic society. Why was it thought that Bilbo Baggins would make a good burglar to assist the dwarves in the theft of the dragon's treasure? Here we have Tolkien involved in wordplay again. Bilbo Baggins was a burgher who became a burglar. A burgher was a free man of a burg or borough, or in the case of hobbits, a borough, which certainly applies to Bilbo Baggins. Even more, its derivative, bourgeois, describes a person with humdrum, middle-class ideas. The Germanic root word burg means mound, fort, or stockaded house. So, burgher, one who owns a house. Burglar, one who plunders a house. So we have the everyday humdrum middle-class burgher entering an epic world and being transformed into his opposite, a burglar. Even so, we are not quite through. There are still other links in underworld jargon between bag and Baggins, and the words bag and baggage as used by working criminals in Britain. Three are quite notable. To bag means to capture, to acquire, or to steal. Baggage man is the outlaw who carries off the loot or booty, and a bagman is the man who collects and distributes money on behalf of others by dishonest means or for dishonest purposes. It appears that Tolkien's choice of names for his hobbit hero not only helped him to create the character of Bilbo Baggins, but also went a long way toward plotting the adventure his hero embarked on. For in The Hobbit, we find Bilbo Baggins, the burglar, is hired by the dwarves to bag the dragon's treasure. He then becomes the baggage man who carries off the loot. However, after the death of the dragon, and because of a dispute after the Battle of Five Armies, Bilbo Baggins becomes the bag man who collects the whole treasure together and distributes it among the victors.